Hey, everybody, welcome into the podcast. We've got another special bonus episode today. We're coming to you from New Riff Distilling in Newport, Kentucky. I'm actually here in the distillery. We're in the event center on the second floor, and I'm here with Jay Erisman, who is the co-founder and the vice president of strategic development here at New Riff. Jay, how are you today?
Great, Bob. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So we're here to talk about your favorite movie, but before we get into that, I'd love to hear a little bit about the story of New Riff. I keep seeing you guys pop up all over the place. It's not just your marketing either. This stuff that you're producing is really making waves in the bourbon industry right now. So tell me a little bit about the history of the company.
Sure. New Riff was founded in the spring of 2014. We opened in May of 14. We started distilling June of that year. And 4 years later, the 4 longest years of our lives, I assure you, we released our first whiskeys last fall at 4 years of age. We are a bit unique for where we come from, New Riff. We came to this out of retail liquor. Next door to us in the parking lot here that we share is a ginormous and excellent liquor store called The Party Source. And the owner of The Party Source, one of those classic American entrepreneurs that our country seems to generate, Ken Lewis is his name. And I worked for him from 2001 as fine spirits manager, and between the two of us, we concocted the notion somehow that we would be really smart to build a distillery and do this ourselves. And so we did, and here we are. It's a dream come true, you know.
That's incredible. Now, did you build this facility specifically to make bourbon here, or were you producing somewhere else, before the facility came about?
Right. No, we were never producing anywhere before this. We built this entirely from scratch with the help of a lot of people, our still maker and everybody's still maker in Kentucky, Vendome, and we had an architect, of course, that did a great job. We had the great serendipitous fortune to work from the beginning with Larry Ebersald, a master distiller consultant who was 35 years in the Seagram's plant in Indiana, and he lives nearby, and he was looking for work, and so we brought him on to oversee our whole project. He became this is appropriate for the movie we're going to talk about. He became our sensei,
Nice.
Sensei Larry.
That's right.
And our kung fu master and kendo master, and he taught us how to make whiskey. We did have a brand very early on that we sourced from the Indiana distillery. It was called OKI, and that's gone now. Just to fully answer your question, yes, we did have some early on, a small amount of old whiskey that we bought, but that was intended to go away. It did go away about exactly a year ago. We sold out the last of it, and we've been selling, of course, our own stuff now. Everything we make is produced and aged in-house.
I love that your standard line of bourbon and rye are both bottled in bond.
Right.
So, and again, that's probably what you were waiting 4 years to produce as well. But I really respect that you guys took the patient route in producing this. So, and Jay has been lovely enough to pour me 3 pours of the New Riff line. So can we walk through what we have here today?
You bet. So we'll begin, as I usually do, with our bottled and bond bourbon. At New Riff Distilling, we only make bottled and bond whiskey. There is no 90 proof 3-year small batch. Mm-hmm. There is no 80 proof easy sipper. Everything is bottled and bond and at least 4 years old. We chose bottled and bond because we realized if we truly are meaning it with our hands on our hearts, when we say we are firstly about quality whiskey. If we truly mean that, how can we not bottle everything at the level of bottled and bond?
Yeah.
Because we realized bottled and bond is not just a category for hipster bartenders with waxed mustaches and tattoos, and God love them.
Yeah.
They push bottled and bond. It's not just a category for your grandpa. Mm-hmm. It's the world's highest standard for quality in an aged spirit. It's higher than the standards for Scotch, higher than the standards for cognac. It is the world leader in quality aged spirit. Whiskey, bottled and bond, brandy, what have you. Nothing surpasses this codification. Since 1897, all these years later, it still tops in the world. So everything we do is bottled and bond, with the exception, as we'll taste, Bob, of our single barrel whiskeys, which we bottle at barrel proof. And so they cannot be bottled and bond, which has to be 100 proof. The single barrels, of course, are still at least 4 years old.
Sure. Well, let's get into it. I'd love to try these.
You bet. So our bourbon is a minimum, like I say, 4 years old. The grain bill is high rye. It is a 30% rye grain bill. not the highest in the industry, but pretty bloody high. 65% corn, 5% malted barley. And everything we make also is bottled without chill filtration. Even the gin is bottled without chill filtration. We do not even have the ability to chill filter here at New Riff. So everything is bottled in bond without chill filtration, which is, as we say, we are here at New Riff, we are a new riff on an old tradition. And when we came to bottled in bond, we placed upon it a new riff of also making it without chill filtration. We don't do the one thing that the federal government will let you do to alter a whiskey that is bonded, and that is to make it filtered. We don't do that.
Sure. I want to just comment for a moment. First of all, I love that you put the mash bill right on the bottle of everything that you're making here. It's not a secret. It's not some sort of family recipe. Right. It's not available to the public. But this bourbon, just on the nose, it just has this really lovely floral note that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna give it a sip. Oh, that's beautiful.
Thanks. Thank you. I like to drink it with a splash of water and suggest you might try the same, just a little dribble, and see as it opens up and becomes amplified, more aroma, more flavor comes out than when it's drunk straight. That's due to it being unchill filtered.
Sure. Now, how did you all decide on landing on the high rye mash bill? Was that something that you had intended from the beginning, or did it just through trial and error work out that way?
Good question. We were here at the Party Source. We had a front row seat as high rye became a part of the bourbon lexicon. It was not really before Four Roses came back to America with a vengeance in 2004. Prior to this, the great Four Roses Distillery, all those years, was making fantastic bourbon that they only sold as a straight bourbon overseas in Europe and Japan and places like that. So we came back on the scene, and they make whiskey up to 35% rye. And then parallel with that, there was the emergence of the Indiana whiskeys, which are nearby to us. Lawrenceburg, Indiana is part of Greater Cincinnati.
Sure.
That huge distillery out there is sort of one of our big brothers. And so we started working with that. Our OKI brand was 35% rye. So we were really struck with how the consumer responded to high rye as a new category in bourbon. But of course, we loved it too. Right. And we wanted to make a flavorsome, potent whiskey. We were not here to make mild, easygoing whiskey. We wanted to make full-throttled whiskey.
Sure.
And one ticket to that was high rye. So we planned from the beginning to have high rye bourbon. Larry Ebersole taught us, as we'll taste in a minute, the second whiskey in our lineup. He taught us what I call the black arts of making the famous 95% rye recipe. And so we knew we were going to make a lot of that as well. But we also wanted to cultivate an identity as being rye-centric.
Sure.
Far opposed from some distilleries in Kentucky that historically disdained rye or never made it or didn't really like to make it if you ask the distillers, because it gummed up the works and it's foaming over in the fermenter and it's so problematic and they have to clean more and all of these reasons. We embraced rye. Yeah. And finally, there's a little bit of a history locally that Greater Cincinnati, Ohio had maybe a little more rye going on here than they did points further south in the Kentucky bourbon industry.
Great. Well, yeah, why don't we move on to this rye? I'm very excited to try this, especially now that you're talking about the mash bill.
Yeah, so this is 95% rye, 5% malted rye. This, again, is our riff on Master Larry's recipe. This is a riff then on what is, in modern times, probably the most historically consequential rye recipe. It is that Indiana rye that turned the industry on its head.
Yeah.
As it became available, and numerous hordes of brands began using it as a purchased item. And we are one of several places, I guess, that has made our own version of it.
Wow. That is fantastic.
Thank you.
And I feel like the 4 years aging has to be helping this a little bit, too, to lose a little bit of that edge that you'd normally get on a rye. It still has all the spice, but it's not harsh at all.
Mm-hmm. We find, and many distillers find, I think, that rye ages a little faster than bourbon. If we go back to when we were sampling our whiskey and examining the quality at 2 years old, the bourbon was running behind the rye in terms of maturity. And so while the bourbon is quite delicious at 4 years old, the rye is still, again, probably a step ahead.
Now, I'm going to take your advice and add just a splash of water here as well. Can you tell me a little bit about this single barrel that we have at the end of our line here?
You bet. So, of course, we wanted to do a single barrel. We had such rich experiences at the Party Source, selling and marketing single barrel whiskeys and private barrel whiskeys and things like that. We wanted to run a program of single barrel that did justice to the history of it and lavished some attention on it. And it's been a sales leader for us, a whirlwind of interest from people, and has allowed us also to interface very closely with a great many retailers, bars, private individuals, groups, bourbon societies, that sort of thing, that come and do private barrel picks. It's barrel proof, but it's not ridiculously high barrel proof. We go in the barrel at just 110 proof.
Okay.
And it comes out an average of right around 112, 112, maybe 113. There is no 137 and a half proof New Riff barrel proof whiskey. Not that we mind such a thing, but it's kind of nice to be able to drink one that is a bit more tractable that way.
Sure. Same age as well?
Always, yes.
Okay, great.
And there's always an age statement on the back of every New Riff bottle of whiskey. We thought for the one guy who says, "You're 4-year-old, give me an 8-year-old." Right. First of all, I say to him, go find me an 8-year-old bourbon whiskey, because they're pretty much gone.
Yeah.
Almost all the age statements they've been dropping like flies. But there will be 9 people who say, "Thank you for respecting me, the consumer, with the age of your whiskey." And what we most love to hear, and we hear it all the time, is, "Man, I can't believe this stuff is so good at 4 years old."
Yeah.
That sounds like a backhand compliment a little bit, but in fact, it's a deep compliment that we did our job.
Sure.
We set out to make excellent whiskey, and we're getting there, I guess. And other people think so too. In April of this year, we were awarded. So we've been in a few spirits competitions over the years, some craft festivals and things like that. But of course, we didn't have whiskey to send to any of these things until we released it. And so now, at 4 years of age, we entered the most prestigious spirits competition in the world. It's the San Francisco World Spirits Competition. For people in the know, it's kind of the only one that matters. And we sent our entire portfolio, these 3 whiskeys plus 2, we have 2 gins, and we sent all these off to San Francisco, hoping that we might, win something.
Yeah.
And in San Francisco, they award silver medals, gold medals, and double gold medals. And to get a double gold, all the judges have to deem a given spirit to be a gold. If one person says that's a silver, then it only gets a gold. And imagine our delight and surprise when the entire portfolio came back with a double gold award.
Yeah.
Unprecedented for a young new distillery to enter the highest stage in the world and not just get a gold medal or a double gold medal, but to run the table. It was
First
great.
I'd ever heard of New Riff, actually. There was an article that came out in, I believe, Forbes a few months ago that one of the judges from San Francisco basically named every bourbon and every whiskey that he loved at the competition on the process to awarding Best in Show whiskey. And he name-dropped New Riff as this brand new distillery. And to be able to see your name in a national publication like that and to see the phrase, I'm excited about what they're doing. Right. What did that mean to you?
That was tremendous. That came from Fred Minnick, who is an astute, what do they say in the Old South? A scholar, a gentleman and a scholar and a judge of good whiskey.
That's right.
And Fred has seen what we're doing here. He was an early guest and a fellow whiskey writer. I used to write for Malt Advocate and Whiskey Advocate magazine, and so did Fred. So he, of course, now has his own magazine, Bourbon Plus, and you should go subscribe to it, I think.
That's right.
So he and I bonded many years ago over being whiskey writers and things like that. So it was a real pleasure to be able to introduce the final product to people like Fred.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Jay, I want to segue here as smoothly as possible into talking about your favorite movie. Part of what we do here on the podcast is we try to marry these concepts of cinema and whiskey. And Jay reached out to me when we were first talking over email, and he said, I'm a bit of a cineast myself. And as soon as he used the word cineast, I knew we were in for a treat. And Jay showed up today with like 4 Criterion Collection DVDs, all from the same director, Akira Kurosawa. And he chose for his movie, 7 Samurai. So, Jay, tell me about what led you to the selection of this film. And he actually has it queued up here on the big screen here in the tasting room that we're in. And I think we're going to watch a few scenes. But before we get to that point, let me know about your selection process.
Sure. Well, I've been a Kurosawa fan for many years. My dad turned me on to Akira Kurosawa. I think he enjoyed the Western aspects. So many people compare Yojimbo to John Ford westerns and these kind of things. There's certainly some interpolation between the two countries and those traditions. And for that matter, the samurai story, to a certain extent, of course much older, is to Japan's culture and history somewhat what the cowboy is to America.
Absolutely.
These iconic characters and memes and themes. And so I got turned on to Yojimbo and Sanjuro and other movies like that at a young age, and Seven Samurai. I think I probably watched The Magnificent Seven first with my dad, and he pointed out, we need to watch. And so later we saw Seven Samurai. It's just been one of my favorites all these years, and Kurosawa, one of my favorite directors. There are it's hard to pick, actually, Bob. When you asked me what's my favorite movie, there were so many choices, and I settled on that because there was one particular scene. Of course, it's tempting to go and find a whiskey-themed movie, like, I was inspired by Scotch, so Braveheart, something like that.
Right.
But there was a scene in Kurosawa that I always in Seven Samurai that I always enjoyed, and that I actually saw other people reference as well. And so when you were talking about what are some favorite scenes, that one jumped out at me, and so I settled on that.
Well, I think we have a scene queued up, so let's go ahead and watch.
So there was this scene. So if you know the movie, we have 7 samurai who are being recruited by a village which is beset by brigands, and they are. The movie is long. It's 3 hours, 30 minutes, 3 hours, 25 minutes, something like that. Bloody long movie. At the time, the longest movie since Gone with the Wind, I think, when it came out. And so the movie unfolds languidly, very slowly. You spend a good hour just in the process of the samurai recruiting this band of 7 of them. And there's a story behind each one. And so as this movie goes on and they get into the fights with the brigands and the bandits, and the samurai begin to fall, your heart sinks with them because you've gotten to know them so well. Right. So this one scene is where they meet a master swordsman. He is one of the best they ever saw, probably. He's a brilliant, a man devoted to one thing, and that is being flippin' brilliant with a samurai sword, I suppose. And he gets in a duel with bamboo swords, and his opponent says, it's a draw. And the sword master says, no, I won.
Yeah.
If these had been metal, if these had been steel, you would be dead. And that's not good enough for the blowhard guy who is challenging him. And so he picks up his steel sword, and then we see what follows. I actually had read about this in another context. I was reading one time an Eric Clapton biography. Turns out Clapton is a Kurosawa fan too, and I'm a guitar player.
Sure,
I'm a rock and roll guitarist, and he mentions this scene in Kurosawa's Seven Samurai, and I think, I remember that. And he was always taken, Clapton was, with the purity of this, that someone would be stating, no, I'm the best guitar player, and in would come someone with the quality of a B.B. King.
Yeah.
Clapton humbly never said himself, and with one note, just shut them all up.
Yeah.
Blow them all away. And that's sort of what this samurai does here. With one stroke, he ends the battle.
Right.
This is not a fencing match so much as it is an execution, given how good this guy is.
Oh, this is such a fantastic scene. And the shot composition as well. Kurosawa is just such a master behind the camera. I'm actually forgetting for a moment that we're conducting an interview right now. I'm just sipping whiskey and watching a movie on a big screen. This is fantastic.
Yeah, such motion and movement in his storytelling. He tells stories through dialogue, but also through motion, and he's a virtuoso at that.
And of course, this is a pairing of one of the best director-actor duos that we've ever seen between Toshiro Mifune and the director Kurosawa.
Yeah,
and the role that he plays, the sort of brutish, drunken imposter of the group, who finally gets his noble end at the end of the film. It's such a great character arc. Gets redemption. Absolutely, one of the best performances of his career, in my opinion.
I would agree.
So, Jay, before we wrap up here, we talked a little bit as we were taking a tour about some of the more experimental things you're doing here at New Riff. And I'd like to ask if you have anything that you'd like to get out there in the open, anything you'd like to plug, any experimental lines that New Riff might be getting into that you'd like our listeners to know about.
Well, now, Bob, if we talked all about that, we couldn't let you leave alive.
That's right.
Have to cut you down with our samurai swords. No, we talk at length about some of the stuff we have coming down the pike. As I showed you, and please, anyone out there who wants to come take a tour, we're open 6 days a week for tours, and we're a small-ish facility. You get up close and personal to the process. You can see what Bob went through today. So we have the ability here to digest any grain down to a 50-pound bag or up to a 2,000-pound bag. Any grain into our recipes, and we designed that from the beginning. It was built into the system from the start. We have big silos that hold a trailer full, 50,000 pounds of corn and rye and malted barley. But we also have a side conveyor, if you will, that allows us to dump anything into the process. So we can make anything, and we have. We've made wheated bourbon. It's not our identity at all to make wheated bourbon per se. We didn't want to be Loretto North, but why would we not make wheated bourbon?
Sure.
We love wheated bourbon. So we've done several wheated bourbons. We've made heirloom corn and rye whiskeys, heirloom bourbon that is, and heirloom rye. In fact, we'll have a little bit of heirloom rye coming out later this year in our New Riff Whiskey Club and in Kentucky retail. We will have someday chocolate oatmeal stout.
Oh,
that was a collaboration between myself and our head distiller and production manager Brian Sprance, who is a brilliant guy. He came to us from the brewing industry, and was really like a master level brewer, probably at Boston Beer at Sam Adams. And I said to Brian one day, "So what about oatmeal? We could make an oated bourbon, couldn't we?" And he said, just sort of spilled out of his mouth to say, oatmeal stout. And then he said, chocolate oatmeal stout. Next thing we knew, we're making chocolate oatmeal stout bourbon. It's a bourbon, but it contains malted oats and raw oats and some dark chocolate malt that you would typically use to make an oatmeal stout whiskey or an oatmeal stout beer. And so, stuff like that creatively is coming down the pike. But it all is going to have to wait 4 years. And some of it longer than that. We may dub some of these, it's good now, but let's wait a little longer.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we also make, on a monthly basis, our 100% malted rye. That will probably be out fall of next year. Knocking on wood, fall of next year, maybe. We'll see if it's ready. But that will be a little bit of an exclamation point.
That's exciting. And I don't think it's an accident that you chose the film you did today. Kurosawa influenced American cinema so much. This movie directly was remade in America as The Magnificent Seven. Yojimbo becomes remade in Italy as A Fistful of Dollars.
Right.
And I can't help but think that as New Riff continues to grow and continues to make waves in the industry, that you all will be an influence in the distilled spirits community, just like Akira Kurosawa was in the film world.
We'll see if we can live up to that.
This has been my favorite movie. I'm here with Jay Erisman. He is the co-founder and the vice president at New Riff Distilling and also a budding DVD commentator. Jay, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Bob. Really enjoyed it.